Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, conscience that made us. Interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and that cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
Steve, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you now. I'm genuinely looking forward to diving into your music. Now, first
Awesome.
off, Devil on the Run. You guys really rock. I mean, your last release is a perfect example of it. Carry that home. Take us a bit deeper into the song.
Yeah, well, thank you very much first for the kind words. Yeah, we were really proud of it. It just, it's one of those things like my partner in crime, Johan Boudreau, who's like the lead guitar player and also sort of producer, recording engineer, and all of that. He sends me riffs, and I'm also a guitar player as well. I play rhythm, and I'll sift through stuff and see what kind of excites me. And I think for this one, it was actually the chorus that came together, and it's funny, like it's sort of going back to that famous McCartney story where what was it, like "Let It Be" or something was like scrambled eggs or something like this, or
Something like that, yeah.
one of his songs, like he had just like some ridiculous, because it was the melody that he had, and it was the same with me. Like I had the melody, and I had completely sort of different lyrics, and it was sort of in the same inspiration, but it wasn't really elegant, and it was just sort of, it felt very sort of rough and thrown together. So I kind of shaped it a bit, and I like the vibe of sort of the without preaching, it's like, what you gonna do in this world at the end when your time here is done, whatever you've done here, you're carrying that home, whether it's good, whether it's bad. So, in the end, try and be good, unless you don't really care. But for me, it's like, let's I find the world is a tough place as it is, and beating each other up just makes it all that much harder, so there's a lot of division in the world today. I'm not going to get political, but without getting all zen and hippie, it's just, I'd rather be in a very positive situation than a negative one.
Yeah, wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all?
Yeah,
And
yeah, so
how,
that's where the song kind of came from.
yeah, how do you guys approach the recording process then and the whole production?
So, Johan has a his own production company called Alchemic Audio, or like Alchemic Audio, and like we've known each other a long time through video games, and because I work also as an audio director in video games, so he worked with me, and then I used him often for doing all like mixes and stuff like this. And like the guy's super talented. He comes in. I've hired him as our recording engineer when we're recording voices for the games and all that. So he has his own studio at home. It's, fully functional. His whole basement was just designed to be a recording studio. So I'm lucky in that sense that it's a great partner to have. And basically, once we put the structure of the song together, then he'll like program and put drums down to it. And since the last two tracks, like since post the Star-Lord stuff that we did for Guardians of the Galaxy, we then recruited drummer Martin Plante, who's another local guy, and he played on Believer and played on Carry That Home. So Johan does like a basic structure of the song, and then Martin comes in and he puts down his track and everything, and Johan played the bass on it, and I sang and did vocals. Johan does some backups, and now more recently, because we wanted to start playing live, and we did one show last year where I got a buddy of mine who was, he's like all he does is play music. So one week he's playing drums for like a Rolling Stones tribute. The next week he's playing bass with us. Then he's playing guitar in his band. I think you may even know him. He's from here, Steve Creep.
I do. I had Steve on in the past. He's a great guy.
I think he was the one who referred me, saying, you should reach out. So anyway, he played bass for us for our show. But more recently, we added Stefan Bedard, who's another local bass player who's been gigging on the scene as long as we have, and he's fit in like a glove. So we just did a big show March 1st at a club here in Montreal, Cafe Campus, and it was amazing. Like the place was packed, and um, we performed all the new stuff as well as some of the Starlord stuff and some cover songs as well to just kind of have fun. And it was a really good night, great party atmosphere. The people were really into it, and yeah, I couldn't have been more happy. We all walked away with huge smiles.
Great, great. Now, for listeners that don't know, you guys have, you mentioned it, you have a pretty unique origin story. You were the audio director for the Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy game.
That's correct.
How did it all come about?
Well, I got to give credit to our creative director, Jean-François Dugas, who's a huge metalhead, huge Iron Maiden fan. So when we were, putting together early on the design for the game, we knew that Marvel had said, like, we want you to make this your own. Like, don't try and copy the MCU. Find your spin on it. So they came to me and they were saying, well, we're going to start the game sort of in the 80s. And whereas the movies, Peter Quill's backstory kind of goes more to the 70s and his mom's experience there. For us, we were going to take that and move it ahead 10 years and sort of make the 80s our origin. And when you start the game, actually, it starts in like 1980 something, and we never really give it a year. But when you start in Peter Quill's bedroom, and the room is just a shrine to the 80s. Like it's just all the posters on the walls. There's like a ColecoVision, I think, on the ground, VHS tapes laying around, D&D dice, Rubik's cubes, like all kinds of stuff. And what's cool is you see it in first person with his feet up on the bed, and he's listening to the Star-Lord album on a cassette, a Walkman, and your controller actually can fast forward and be the Walkman, and
Oh,
you can listen to the whole album before you even play the game. So you're just sitting there on his bed, and there's a Rolling Stone magazine with an article about Star-Lord Band, and we actually got a writer from Rolling Stone. So I'm skipping a bit ahead, but JF basically came to me and he said, "Hey, we had this idea for us in our universe. The reason he took the name Star-Lord and then put it on his back was because he loved this band from the 80s, a heavy metal band called Star-Lord." And I'm like, "Wow, that's cool. I like that." And I said, "Of course, anybody who loved a band at one point, you wrote it on your jacket or designed or put a patch." So the fact that he had that Star-Lord on his back, I said, "Yeah, that really fits nice." And then he's like, "Okay, I'm not done." He's like, "What would you think about if we go one step further and we actually write and record the record?" And I'm like, "Well, that's really cool." I said, "I think it'd be awesome." And he goes, "Okay, well, can you do it?" And I said, "Well, I'm definitely going to try because that's the opportunity of a lifetime. Like, where was that
yeah.
opportunity when I was in my 20s?" So it's kind of funny that it took a long while to get here, but um, I couldn't have been more excited. And I knew it was a big task and a big undertaking to try and do the album while we were in development. So I knew I couldn't do it all myself. So I reached out to Johan and I said, do you want to try and do this with me? And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we demoed. The first song we did was Space Riders with No Name, and we wrote that, we recorded it, and then I brought JF into my audio room, and I said, "Okay, I got something to show you and play for you." And I didn't tell him who it was or anything, and I just played it. And he was like, really getting into it. He's like, "Is this for our game?" And I'm like, "Maybe, maybe." And he's like, "Man, it's really good." And he's like, so at the end, he's like, "Okay, I love it." And he's like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "It's me and Johan." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And my initial plan was, I figured, okay, like I've sang in plenty of bands and cover bands, and I've been a backup singer. I'm comfortable in either role, but I figured I was like, I'll sing it because obviously I got to sell you the song idea and show you some kind of demo. But I was pretty much expecting him to say like, okay, so are we gonna get a like a real singer or and
Right.
I was gonna go out and grab somebody I knew from the scene or whatever. But he loved my voice and he was like, "Who's singing?" I'm like, "It's me." And he's like, "That's you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "This is awesome." He's like, "We're keeping it. Don't change anything." And I was like, "Are you serious? You want to go with it?" And he's like, "We're going with it." So
Yeah.
like I said, I couldn't have been happier. And then the real work started, and we started writing and recording, and every few months or so, Joanne would send me some riffs, and I would sift through it. And I'd be like, "Okay, I think we could do something with this." And then I would just write lyrics that were, to be fair, I sat with JF early on, and we kind of made a list of sort of what's the theme of the record. Like, obviously, the fact that we're making a Marvel game and all that, I'm not going to be writing Wild Side by Motley Crue with strippers and, people getting
Yeah.
killed and stuff. So I was like, let's get a box that's the sandbox we're going to play in. And so yeah, from that point on, once him and I had established the parameters of the sandbox, we I started writing, and every time we would have an idea, we would record it, and I would send it to him, and he'd be like, "Man, I love it," and then he'd send it to Marvel for approval, and they're like, "Yeah, we love it." And believe it or not, like we didn't get one idea refused. It was like 10 for 10.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Crazy, crazy. And
it was
then
pretty shocking.
Devil on the Run then, is it like a continuation of that or are you starting fresh or
It's fresh. I mean, Marvel owns the Star-Lord, obviously the moniker, and owns the rights to all that. So, in no way are we going out, or do we want to go out and perform as Star-Lord band. Like they own all of that. But we both thought, when you look at Spotify and all that, like I kept freaking out, going, "What's going on?" Like you look now, and Zero to Hero has like over 6 million streams.
yeah.
I'd say like half the songs on the album are over 1 million streams. So I was like, well, people obviously seem to like it. So, why don't we keep writing and putting stuff out and see what happens? So he was like, yeah. So we came up, I threw out the name Devil on the Run, and he was like, yeah, works for me. And then he sent me the first idea, which became Believer. And that was sort of our first post single, and we did a video for that. And then when we came with Carry That Home, like I said, it was a bit busy and we couldn't really get the time to get the video together, which we may or still not do. We're not sure, but I think right now we're looking at just getting more music out there as quick as we can and sort of keep building momentum and yeah, and just see where it goes. I mean, we're having fun. I mean, I love writing and recording music, and the fact that people are into it just blows my mind and makes me go, all right, well, let's keep having fun with this.
Yeah, yeah. Do you actually get the recognition then, because it's music for a video game. Your face isn't on it, do you ever get recognized for it or
Not really, but it's funny. Like, I've gone to like the Comic Cons that they have here or something, and I was wearing the Star-Lord band T-shirt, the album cover, and this guy walked by me and he was wearing one, and I'm like, hey, and he's like, hey, and we started just chatting quick, and he's like, I guess you're a fan of the game, and I said, well, I guess I kind of have to be. I'm like, I'm the guy who co-wrote the Star-Lord album, and he's looking at me, he's like, are you serious? Like, and he didn't believe me.
yeah.
Like I thought it was full of shit, and I had to basically like open up my Twitter account and show him like that's me, And then he's like, "Oh my God, like can I get a picture?" And that's when it became funny, where he's
Yeah.
like, "Can I get a picture?" And he was all excited. So I don't, like you said, get that kind of recognition, but at the same time, I'm still, like I said, super grateful and honored just to get that kind of opportunity. It's something, any musician would have to be able to have your music backed and put out by Marvel with a game,
Yeah.
that's a nice way to get your stuff exposed to people.
True.
And that's why after that I was like, well, it seems kind of silly to let it all just sit there and go away and do nothing. And I'm like, we should really try and build on it and just see what can happen, where it can go.
Yeah, yeah. And what's the vision for Devil on the Run then? Do you approach it like a hobby or are you serious that you want to make it to the big leagues?
Look, so here's the question I was sort of afraid of
Right.
how to answer it in a nice, elegant way. But I'll be completely straight. So whether how we regard this as a hobby or not, I mean, like I said, I'm a full-time musician as well as audio director. I still play in a few bands and usually gig once a month, maybe once every 2 months. So it's still a regular part of my life, which I'm super happy and grateful for. As for our vision, I mean, obviously I'm not a spring chicken. You can tell by looking at me. So it's not like I expect the rock and roll world to be like, hey, is there any, 45, 50 and up guys that are looking to make it? It's not exactly the target audience, but I'd still love to be able to take this as far as it can go. And if we could get, to the point where maybe we get to do some, opening gigs for bigger bands when they come into Montreal. Obviously, if there was something on the table that was, like a dream deal of like, hey, these guys would love to take you across Canada as the opening act, I would seriously consider that. But I don't, in today's new world and new market, like, I don't have any false aspirations. I mean, I have the fantasy side where, somebody like Dave Grohl's like, hey, I heard your album. Why don't you come do a song with me? And I'd be like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but again, that's more on the dream fantasy side.
I getcha. I getcha. Before we move on to some concert questions now, since you
Yeah.
work in computer games, I have to ask, you don't work on the new Grand Theft Auto, do you?
Nah, I don't.
I was going to ask you for some secrets or
I,
whatever.
I wish I did. It's a great franchise.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Concert questions. So, as a concert goer, what concerts do you think have made you?
Uh, well, definitely, I'd have to start with Kiss. That was probably the band that had the biggest influence on me. I was a young, not very popular, hard time fitting in, little dopey looking, geeky looking, and all of a sudden I see these guys, and I loved comic books, I loved horror movies and horror books, and now here's this band that kind of puts it all together in one package of like, visually like, as a kid you're like, God, these guys look like superheroes, but they're rock stars, and then even seeing them in a Marvel comic of their own. So I got into them probably in the late 70s and without dating myself too much. And my dad actually took me to my first show at 12 to see Kiss.
Oh man.
So for me, it was almost like at that point I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't want nothing else. I was like, my dad, he's old school. He's, thankfully still around, and he still says it was one of the worst experiences of his life. He was like loud and, cigarettes and drugs and people throwing up and beers. And I'm like, I'm home, you know, this is where I belong. So
Oh
it
my
was, it was
God.
quite, it was quite amusing. But um, I've stayed a huge fan of the band. I mean, on this endless reunion sort of say goodbye farewell tour. I think I've seen them three times, and that's three times they've come through here. And what's cool is my two girls, the first show they ever got to see was Kiss. I brought them to see
Oh,
Kiss, so it's
oh,
like full
nice.
circle. And they love the band too, like, and they're big into concerts. And so I mean, my music, I love music, period. Like I can listen to a score from a movie and just be, just totally enthralled into it. And live, I mean, every band, it's almost like going to different restaurants to me. It's like certain bands, you go in going, okay, well, these guys are, amazing musicians. Like I've seen, like I love Rush. I've seen them a bunch of times. And again, you don't go see them for, pyrotechnics and that kind of show. You go for the musicianship. So it's a
Yeah.
different vibe, whereas Kiss is more of a spectacle of, music with explosions and everything. And it's a visual sort of much more of a visual experience. Same with like I've seen Alice Cooper a bunch of times, and he's another guy that I've loved. Fell into that same Kiss sort of thing of
Yeah.
well, who else does this kind of thing? Oh, there's this guy who like hangs himself and cuts his head off and has a snake around his neck, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So seen him a bunch of times. I mean, I've seen probably everybody in the hard rock genre over the years.
Mm,
And some bands, super, you walk away and you still have memories of how good they were live. I
yeah.
can still remember some great shows like, whether it was Maiden or Priest. I mean, I've seen all these bands at least 6, 7 times. So avid concert goer, Van Halen,
Mm.
probably definitely saw them every. I mean, it was one of those every time they'd come through, I would just go and see them. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I get you. I get you. I'm actually seeing Priest tomorrow for the first time ever.
Oh my God, you're gonna
Yeah.
love it.
I can't wait. I
I
can't wait.
mean, such a good band, such a great show, and I mean, Halford. I mean, he's the metal god. I mean, there's no taking anything away. The guy's just a freaking. He's just a master of what he does. You know.
Yeah,
And the new
exactly.
album sounds phenomenal too. Like I've been listening to it the last week. I was really impressed. I mean, for, what I love is that kind of it kind of validates what we're trying to do where I'm like, okay, well look, these guys are in their 70s and they're
Mm,
still putting out relevant music,
yeah.
you know? And that's where I'd like to slot in. I mean, obviously it's like whether, if age isn't an issue and you care about the music and the vibe, which is the way it kind of should be, I'm like, well, there you go. These guys are 70 and they're still putting out music that people care about. So good on them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's funny. I was going to ask you how you felt about guys like Kiss and everything that when you see them like back in the 70s, they're young, they're vibrant, they're great. Then you've seen them now and they are in their 70s. How do you think they hold up?
They hold up very well. I'm very impressed. I mean, I can see where, it's a bit different, but man, I mean, you got to give credit to these guys. They work hard. They've always been to me one of the hardest working bands out there who take their shit really seriously. Paul Stanley keeps himself in great shape. I mean, I was talking to my trainer the other day, and I sent him a picture of Paul Stanley flexing at 70, and he was like, "Holy shit!" He's like, "Guy's got guns," and I was like, this is why I want to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And to see them get up there in these boots and costumes and the makeup and he still moves around quite a bit. I mean, Gene is the one who's obviously a little bit more tame, but to be fair, he's wearing like what, about 60 pounds of
Yeah.
costume and gear. So, but he still does the whole shtick of, blowing fire and, spitting blood. And, he knows he's a true performer. He's sort of like Halford, where he doesn't have to do much to get the crowd to respond. Like he can just look at the audience a certain way, or he'll stand there as everybody's applauding and just do this
Yeah.
and look at it, and the crowd just raises it another 3 levels.
Yeah.
And that's, they're icons. They're at that level where they can do that. So I was impressed. I mean, I know what a lot of the older bands today, people are getting tagged with, are they lip syncing and that? I don't think they are. I think what they're doing, and again, whether it's right or wrong, I'll let somebody else decide. I mean, it's not for me to judge. And I pay money to go see the show, and I'm happy. And I know people are like, "Oh, it's not live. It's bullshit." It's like, look, man, at that age, like some nights, some songs, you may not be able to deliver it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure what they've done is they've recorded the stuff, obviously, in the studio when they were in good shape and rested off tour. And they have that as a backup. And if that night he can't pull off that song, well, then, the guy's mixing him down and the backup up. But I can tell you, like, it's not, there's no way that whole show is faked. Like, I mean, I've been there and,
Mm,
there's certain songs, obviously the ones that are maybe a bit higher in the register that, he has a problem with. So, I mean, and if you're going there, you're going there to be entertained. I mean, let's be honest, you're not going to see Kiss for like the most amazing musicianship. That was never, and to be fair, that was never their sort of sales tag. It wasn't like, hey, it's like, no, we keep it simple. Like to me, they're kind of like an AC/DC. Like they keep it
yeah.
simple. There's nothing revolutionary in AC/DC, but they're great songs with great grooves and, huge choruses that people resonate with. So, not everything has to be like technically impressive, which is something I've tried to argue with people over the years. Like when we get into like the value, like, oh, Kiss, they suck. And it's like, okay, they suck, but they've been around 50 years. Like you got to at least acknowledge, and they've been putting out albums, I mean, up until the last little while, but they were still putting out albums in the 2000s.
Mm,
So, I mean, and if you look at their past, like in the 70s, a lot of bands I don't think could have kept up with what they did, where they would put a record out, tour, back in the studio, like a record came out every year.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive, but it's what burnt them out and basically got the other two guys to leave at one point. You can only do that for so long, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the local scene then for a band like yourselves trying to break in, what's the local scene like in Canada?
Uh, Here in Montreal, it's okay. It's not obviously it's not bad, but it's not as great as it was back in the day. I mean, I think that's just live music in general. But there's more and more acts that come through and play the smaller clubs, which is really nice. Like I saw Wolfgang Van Halen at a small club back in November. Um, you get some good acts, and I mean for us, the club we played, we actually rented the club out. It's almost like a pay to play where you rent it out and then you charge what you want, and but great stage. I mean, I'll send you some photos and even some video if you want. But
Yeah.
the stage was amazing. Big moving lights. Like, I mean, we look like rock stars up there just because the venue is such a great venue. So it's not like there's tons of those places. And obviously, we all have day jobs, so it's not like we're looking to go out and play all these rural areas and all that. So we like to sort of go, okay, well, when we're going to play, we really want to make it work and make it an event. And it kind of works because, if you're playing all the time, well, then, people will just kind of, yeah, I've seen them and I'll see them next time or whatever. But when it's a little more sparse, you make it and build it up as more of an event. It's like, okay, we don't want to miss it because, like they might not be playing for another 3, 4 months or something.
Yeah.
So that it went really well. Like I said, the last one, and I'm sure we're going to be looking at doing another one in the next 6 months. But we wanted right now just write some more songs and get some more songs out there.
I like it. I like it. Now, if you think of all the gigs you've played over your entire career, is there one that sticks out as the highlight?
Uh, I'll be honest. Right now, the one we did on March 1st really, it really was like sort of a heartwarming thing. Like without getting too deep into it. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're aware of, the video game industry is going through a lot of rough times right now and changes. So my team that I delivered Guardians with, we had been working on another development project for the last 2 years, and they canned the project at the end of January. And what was worse was they basically laid off 95% of that team, and that's the team I've spent the last 15 years with. That's the team I did Guardians
Oh
with.
no.
And when Guardians hit, it was around the time of COVID. Like we had to all work from home, and um, so originally there was a lot of big, great marketing ideas to like go out and like put the band out on the road, almost like to doing like Gamescom and stuff like this. And COVID killed all of that. So that was heartbreaking for me, but at the same time, not as bad as what happened in January where, everybody got let go. And the rough thing was is like with some people who work from home like myself, like I go in occasionally to the office and I wasn't there that time. So I didn't even get to see people that I'd been with. I reached out to everybody on Facebook and that. So what was cool was the show on March 1st brought a lot of those work people because they never got to see, the Star-Lord thing performed live. And that was something we always wanted to kind of celebrate. So we performed the whole album at that show, and we did, like I said, the Devil on the Run stuff and some cover songs, some Maiden, some Priest, stuff like that, Metallica, Motorhead, and it was just such the vibe was it was special. It was almost like people came together, and it was like a healing, if I could put it in that sense, where everybody hadn't seen each other since that shit day, and now it's like the vibe isn't such a shit vibe. It's a celebratory, like we're all still here, and everybody it'd been a month, so people had had time to sort of process it and kind of move on now. So there was a lot of smiles and hugging, and like I said, it was a really magical sort of vibe in the air, and not to mention I had a lot of my friends and guys I play in other bands with. Like sometimes you're looking out and you're like, oh my God, this guy's here. Like, oh my God, she came out. There was a lot of that during the night.
Yeah,
So when I got home, it was a good 2, 3 a.m. before I was able to kind of unwind and get that adrenaline out.
I could imagine. I could imagine. That gig is going to be very hard to beat, like, because it set the bar so high. The next one might not be like that.
Well, we had done one in October where we played a smaller club and it was a bit more intimate. And we did the same thing. We did most of the album plus the Devil on the Run stuff and a few covers. And again, like I was just so surprised at the crowd reaction. Like I mean, we bring a lot of energy on stage, and we're all very experienced playing live, so it's not like any of us are like, standing staring at our feet, and like we definitely are really in it and interact with the crowd, and all three of us up front have a lot of experience, so there's no stage fright, or we all know how to work an audience, and we all know the type of show people want to see, so we give that. And just that first gig, like the energy, like I mean, it was a small club, and I think we broke into Ace of Spades, and like a mosh pit broke out in front of us, where about 12 people were just slamming, and the mic's getting hit and hitting me in the mouth while I'm playing, and I'm like, all right, let's just do this. This is cool, So
Right.
even that, I was like, okay, it kind of surpassed what I was expecting. I mean, people are gonna, you hope they're gonna enjoy it. Obviously, they're coming out because they like the music, but you never know, like, is it going to be like, polite collapse, or are people just going to lose their shit? And for this show, for that one, the energy level, like, I was like, wow, like, I wasn't expecting that. And then, so already I was like, well, can we do it again and see how it goes? And this March 1st gig, like I said, there was a little bit of a variable of this sort of healing thing that played a part in it. But the energy during the show was just insane. Like, people were just going like crazy, and we were like, wow, this is great, and you feed off of that, so
Yeah.
you're like, okay, we're gonna play even harder and move more, and and do more, and it's just like this back and forth give and take, and when that happens, I mean, there's nothing cooler than that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Almost like a drug. And I
Yeah.
usually I usually ask then if you flip that question around now, any gig you've played ever, the worst one, everything went wrong. How did you overcome
Oh man, God, there's so many. I mean, I've been gigging since I started at 14, so it's been a lot of years of playing live. I don't know. I mean, at the time when everything seems so serious and like we're trying to make it, and you have a bad gig and everybody kind of turns on everybody, and now you look back and you're like, ah, it's all kind of silly, isn't it? It's a bit funny. I mean, I can remember a bad gig. I was actually not playing. I was doing live set. Well, I can remember a couple of funny things. One, I remember we were playing, and this is back when, like, in the hair metal days, and back here there was a really strong scene of music, a lot of clubs, a lot of great bands. Like, I'm not gonna compare it to L.A., but you could tell like Montreal almost had its own like LA vibe sort of scene. Like, it was really, there was a lot of clubs you could play. It just seemed like every week there was a new band with like hair out to here and
it?
posters and names. So it was very competitive. And we were supposed to play this club on our own, and it was a local club, so like we knew we were gonna have a lot of our friends in that. And then, shiesty club owners and the guy, the sound man calls me and he's like, so you and the other band will be playing it, and I'm like, the other band? And he's like, well, yeah, it's Easter weekend. We have you and we have this other band. And I'm like, well, no, I was told it was just us. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And
Yeah.
like, well, no, that's what it. And I'm like, okay, well, how's the money working? And he's like, well, we're gonna do this and that. And I, it's one of those situations like you either go along or they find somebody else. So you're like, all right, I vented and I got pissed off, but in the end, it didn't change anything. So I said, all right, let's just go in and do the weekend. Problem being is the other band was really good, and we had, we were still a bit green in some areas.
Right.
So I remember we were doing at the time, because it was very popular, we were doing Poison, Nothing But a Good Time, and I come out and I start the lick, and it's just me, right? And I'm playing it, and then as I hit the G chord, it just sounds like complete utter ass, and I'm like,
Oh,
what the hell? And I hit the D and it sounds, and I look and it's because I left my pick in the strings
oh my
and I
God.
didn't realize it. So I started playing it. And of course, as long as I'm barring everything, you don't hear that the pick's in there. But as soon as I hit that open G,
Mm,
and I'm just trying not to look like, you don't want to show it and have what we call the scared face, where you're
mm,
like, oh my God. So you try and fake it, but once you hit that second bum note, there's no faking it. It's not like I can go like, it's not me. It's like, no, you're the only one playing.
yeah.
So that was pretty bad, and just I remember that wasn't a very high morale weekend for the band at the time because we were getting our ass kicked by the other band like pretty much every night. Uh,
Right.
um, and I can remember doing sound for actually I actually play in a cover band with the guitar player who was playing that night, and it was for a big biker party, sort of like Hell's Angels.
Oh,
I was mixing, and one big Hell's Angel guy decides to come up to me and he's like, "Turn it up." And I'm like, "Okay," and I kind of just fake a bit turning it up because I'm like, at some point the system's not going to take it. And he's like, "No, I fucking told you to turn it up all the way up." And I'm like, "Oh, fuck." Bring the faders up, and sure enough, within 5 minutes, the fronts fucking blow.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm just like, "Oh no." And now I'm just like bikers and they're gonna get angry. But luckily, I think everybody was drunk enough that they just took the monitors and turned them like speakers
Yeah.
and finished the night. Like it was halfway towards like the end of the show. So we finished the last few songs, but I was just like, I'm just getting out of here and I'm never working this gig again. I was like, I'm not coming here to get threatened, and possibly get shot. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm done, you
Oh
know.
man, I wouldn't blame you.
Oh, we had a really fun one. One of the best that I'll always remember. That same cover band that where we were getting our butt kicked. We got this amazing, like when you have an agent, you never know what you're gonna get. Hey, the guy's like, we got a great room for you, and you get there, and it's like, things are dripping on your head while you're playing,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my God, and there's asbestos on the walls, and
Oh.
you're like, okay, great. But this one, it was on the road, so it was about a 6, 7 hour drive from here for a weekend, but we got paid like at the time it was a lot of money. It was like $1,000 for 2 nights, but we were only playing for half an hour each night. We were like the opening act, and again, it was for a biker festival, and these guys treated us like gold.
Hmm.
I mean, it was like VIP treatment, like we'd be in our sort of hotel lounge area, and there'd be a guy at the door standing like security, and then he'd walk
Nice.
in at some point and he's like, "You boys need anything?" And we're like, "Oh, some beer would be cool." Guy'd leave and he'd come back, put a 2-4 in the room, and then walk back at the door. And all weekend, like we'd play for our half an hour, and then it was like they were just wheeling kegs backstage for the bands, and we were just, yeah, let's go. So, it was like we got paid to basically play half an hour and then just party
Yeah.
for the whole weekend. So that was like those gigs were very rare, but you remember them when you got them because it was a weekend of just insane fun.
Yeah. I was just going
Like,
to say, if more gigs were like that, it'd be perfect.
oh man, like I said, it was one of those, everything like the partying, the people
Mm.
we met, like the laughing, it was nonstop, it was
Yeah.
just pure out fun. So those, like you said, they're kind of rare, unfortunately. It's usually the other ones that I was referring to where,
Yeah.
some kind of radioactive fluid dripping from the ceiling onto your heads and scalding you, so.
Yeah.
But it was
Unfortunately.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you play? Because you sound like you've done some of these gigs.
Years ago, I haven't done
Okay.
it in years now. I just kind of sit in the room and mess around on guitar, drums myself,
That's
you
all
know.
right.
Yeah. I keep saying at some stage I must get back to it, but I'd imagine I'll be like in my 50s or 60s by the time I get time to do it, you
Hey,
know.
why not? I mean, well, you got kids, just start training them, and there's your jam band.
I've thought of it already.
I got my two daughters are both like my eldest now, she's 17, and she plays in a band and gets to perform once in a while, like at obviously not bars, but like we have a big festival here in the summer, Rib Fest, where it's like for 3 days, like there's all these companies from the States that come and just cook ribs outdoors. And they have a
Oh,
huge stage out, and it's all local bands and everything for like 2, 3 days. So they got to play on the bill last year. So it was
oh
really cool.
man.
Like I was like, hey, you're on the same bill as your dad.
How
So
did
that
she
was
feel
great
about
to see.
that?
Oh, she thought it was great. I mean, she loved it. And I mean, they do like hard rock stuff. And so I was just like, man, this is so cool. Like seeing my kid up on stage. And so
Yeah.
now I'm working on getting the younger one. She's 13, and I'm like, all right, we got to get you on drums, We got a drum kit here, so I'm actually looking at my cover band drummer who's going to start coming over and giving her some lessons because I can tell she's good. She's got the groove for it, but just needs the teaching now.
Hmm. Oh.
And then eventually, I can gig with them and play with them until they kick me out and say I'm too old.
That'd be pretty cool. You'll
Yeah,
uh you'll have to come back on when you have the family band.
yeah, absolutely.
And before we dive into the last couple of questions, then future plans that are set in stone, new music, when will it be out? Gigs, anything you can share?
New music, we're going into writing mode now. Like I said, we were doing a lot of prep the first 2 months, getting ready for this gig. We literally didn't have the bass player up until December. So, Steve's got his own great project going on. So, he was like, look, if you're really stuck, like I'll do it. And I was like, look, man, like you're doing great pushing your own thing and I don't want to take you off of that. Like stick with that. We'll find somebody. And the drummer plays in a Megadeth tribute band here locally.
Right.
So he's like, well, the bass player, and we were like, hey, if he's a nice guy, and obviously if he's playing Megadeth, he's good. So we were like, as long as he's a cool dude, like let's meet him and let's see if he's interested. And he heard Believer and what we were doing, and then listened to the Starlight, and he's like, man, yeah, I could get into this. So, it's funny, like in the younger days, finding players, even though the scene seemed so much bigger, was really tough. Like
Mm.
if you're looking for a bass player, it was like, well, it's like looking for a unicorn. Like it just seemed so hard to find the right guy.
Mm.
And here we interview, like meet one guy and we're like, all right, well, you're in, and he's like, all right, great. And I came home and I said to my wife, I was like, that was like so easy. It's just, great vibe and it clicked. So right now I think we want to focus on trying to get a bit more songs out, a bit more material. So build off of what we did with Carry That Home and try and get a few more tracks out there in the next few months so that I think when we go out and gig again, probably, I'm thinking probably early summer, we'll have more material and probably a video or something like that we'll do for one of these songs. So that's probably the plan for the moment. Like I said, we all sort of have our side gigs that, we use to pay bills and all that. So obviously that limits the time. Whereas if I was in my 20s and just doing this full time, it would probably move a bit quicker. But again, we're doing it for the fun and for the love of music. And like I said, if it can ever go to any kind of higher level, I think we're all going to be happy. And if it's just putting out music that, the people who've followed us up until now continue to like, then that's fine too.
Yeah, yeah, true.
It's kind of a nice position to be in where, it's not this like, oh my God, like if I don't make it, I'm screwed, which was, I lived that for about 20 years, you
Yeah,
know, and it's nice to sort of not have that. I find it can actually be more productive where, when you do sit down, you don't feel like there's like five guns at your face. You're like, no, I'm sitting down to enjoy the process and to write and to, not be like, oh my God, I didn't write anything today. I'm screwed.
yeah,
So it's a different approach and I enjoy it. And I think we actually work better with that type of vibe. And as I said, though, like even the pressure when we were writing the Star-Lord stuff, I mean, it's funny, the song that took off the most, Zero to Hero, was the last one that was written for the album. And it was kind of like, my creative director's like, Steve, it's getting a little late. When are you going to be bringing this? Because, they got to do the jacket and the cassette with all the lyrics. So there's other departments down the assembly chain that need to have the time to do their shit.
yeah,
So I was like, okay, okay. And I remembered it was during the Christmas break, and I'd be going out every night walking my dog, and I'd have the song playing, just, the sort of scratch track. And I kept trying to come up with the melody. And I had the chorus, and I knew it was a good chorus. I didn't have the lyrics, but I knew I had that, are you ready to go, go, go? And I'm like, that's a great hook, and I want to use that and build around it. And it wasn't until, like I said, like the gun really came up into my face, and it was sort of like, we need the song. I was like, okay. And then the floodgates open, and I just got that first line of, because I was like, okay, we've covered almost everything up in the album. I'm like, what am I going to write about? And I was like, from the time I was young, I knew this day would come. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I'm like, okay, you can kind of sing about him, but it's not him. Like everything that was written on that album can relate to the game, and yet it wasn't really written specifically with that in mind.
yeah,
It was
yeah, I
almost
getcha.
like it was right behind my front consciousness, and it was sort of guiding and helping, but at the same time, at that point, I just wanted to bang the song out and be like, okay, and let's get something good. And that's what I said to Johan. I said, okay, we really got to go all out on this one. And that's why we were like, okay, yeah, fast tempo, in your face. And I was like, okay, well, lyrically, what am I going to deliver? And then when I wrote it out, it, when I gave it to them, they were like, oh my God, this is great. Like you wrote kind of like the story of the character in the game. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did. Just in my head, I was just sort of like, okay, this is cool, and it all works, and it all flows well, and it tells a good story. And then I realized I was like, oh, look what you did, and I was like,
Mm.
okay, great, we'll take it.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
It'd be nice to take credit and be like, yes, I'm brilliant that way. In reality, it's like, you fall out of something and land in something cool, and you're like, oh, this works.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. I get you. Well, you know what? I, for one, can't wait to see what you put out next now with Devil on the Run. I'll be really looking forward to
Oh, I
it.
really appreciate that, man. Like I said, it's great to meet people like yourselves who support, unsigned acts and do this type of thing. And we're just happy to, like I said, to have a medium to put stuff out. That's the one nice thing. Again, like everything comes with pros and cons. And back in the '80s, we couldn't be doing this. Like,
Yeah.
if you didn't have a record label pushing you, like, or a radio station, like it was just you just sat there with, I remember going to jam for bands, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got a CD," and you'd look, and the walls would be full of boxes of their CDs that are just sitting there, and I'm like, "So you had money to print the CD? Like,
Mm,
it's not selling. You're not
yeah.
selling it. It's one thing to have a CD. It's another thing to be able to say, well, we're selling it and it's moving." You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
were using them as like, beer things everywhere. I'm like, yeah, I can use it as a bookend somewhere. So today, what's cool is, bands like whether it's myself or somebody like my kids starting out or whatever, the technology, like you don't need to sell your soul to go into a recording studio. The flip side of that is now you have to wade through a lot more, um, we'll say crap to find the good stuff
Yeah.
because everybody's able to come in now. Whereas before there was more of a screening process. And that didn't mean that everything that got signed was great because, I could sit here and go on for 20 minutes telling you about how the record people ruined every industry they created, like whether it was the hair metal genre and, quickly it's like, okay, Bon Jovi broke big and sold Slippery When Wet, Def Leppard broke. We're gonna sign everybody that looks and sounds like Bon Jovi and Def Leppard, except this time the singer's a brunette. You don't like the brunette? We got a redhead guy. We got this
Yeah.
band is this band, and it's like, yeah, but what about the songs? We'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
And then everything becomes diluted to the point of like everybody's got a power ballad and everything seems very formula and it loses what was cool. And how did it get lost? Because they just diluted it chasing money.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with grunge. Then Nirvana broke, and it's like all the hair metal guys couldn't get somebody to spit on them if their head was on fire. And then they did the exact same thing. Okay, we're going to sign everybody that wears flannel and looks at their feet while they play,
Yeah.
or wears the combat boots and this and listen. I mean, I love Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and bands like this. I mean, they were phenomenal. But the other side is there was a lot of garbage that came out too, where you were just like, who the hell are these? Like everybody's singing with their yeah sort of voice, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, that's the new formula. And now I compare the industry very much now to I find the 50s and 60s where it was very single oriented. Nobody gave a shit about albums. It's just like, where's your single? Where's your single? Back then, dating myself, we had this cool vinyl thing called the 45. And it was just a small little record and it had one song on one side and one on the other. And that's what radio stations would get.
Yeah.
And I feel it's gone back to that now where, record labels don't really care about investing and spending time supporting a band. That was one thing back then too. If you were lucky, they'd be like, all right, we got a 5-year plan. And, by the third album, we want to be profitable. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that seems feasible. Whereas now you get one shot. And if it doesn't do anything, it's like,
You're
all right,
gone.
back to McDonald's with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So,
crazy. It's crazy. You'd
yeah.
wonder what the future holds, kind of. Will it come full circle again, back to albums, back to bands being
I'd like to
profitable?
think that it does because I feel everything in life is on a wheel and it's always turning and and what's old becomes new again at some point. I think it's going to need, some band to basically go big the way, Bon Jovi did or the way Nirvana did. It's going to take that sort of thing because that's what happens. And then everybody looks and goes, oh man, like that's making a lot of money. How do we get a piece of that? that's the sad thing is it's driven by greed and all that. And it's, when you start mixing creativity and artists and all that with the money and the business side, like the two don't really,
No.
you know. So I feel like the artist had a better chance in the back in the 70s and all that of like, you had more of the support. Whereas now you don't have that, but you do have the ability to put out something that sounds highly produced on your own. And now and today, like, I mean, I met you through the magic of the internet, and, you
Yeah.
can put your music out on the internet and you can build a website and you can do a lot of this stuff on your own where, you can promote yourselves to a pretty good level at some point, where you don't really need um, the that whole machine to be part of it yet. At some point, if you want to get to a certain level, you do need the machine, but it's easier to kind of get the visibility from the machine if, now you have tools that weren't available to us 20 years ago.
Yeah. True. True. Yeah. You can
I'd
kind
love to
of,
see the album thing come back because I mean, to me, the experience of putting on a record and just sitting on your bed and reading all the liner notes and listening to it and the pacing of the record. I mean, it's there was an experience there,
yeah.
and kids don't get that experience. I mean, I know I sound like grandpa here, but it was a cool experience. Like there was nothing more exciting to me than coming home with that album I just bought that I've been waiting for at the record, like I don't know, Number of the Beast or Peace of Mind or something like this. Like I can remember coming home with Power Slave and just putting it on and just sitting on my bed going like this is unbelievable and like reading everything and I was just even I went to see Dune Part 2 this week and I was explaining to my daughter. I was like, "Well, I read the book." And I said, "And you want to know how I read it?" And she's like, "How?" And I said, "Because on Peace of Mind, Iron Maiden wrote a song to tame a land." And I said it was originally supposed to be called Dune, but the writer Frank Hebert or whatever his name is, the
Mm,
guy who wrote Dune, he wouldn't give them the rights to call it Dune. So they called it To Tame the Land, but the whole song is about, the Fremen and the stories and everything that happens in Dune is in the song. So I was like, it sounds so cool. Like I'm gonna go to the library and get this book. And I did, and I fell in love with it. So, there's a lot of cool things that, heavy metal would, educate and, you'd go and read about the occult and Mr. Crawley. Well, who is Mr. Aleister Crawley? Okay, witchcraft guy, black magic. All right, let's read about that, and
yeah.
there's a lot of cool educational stuff that I found came out of listening to metal.
Yeah. Yeah. There actually is. It's not all Satan and the beast and stuff like that, you know?
No, no, there's a lot of interesting stuff, and the hard rock community doesn't get enough credit for being well-read and educated people.
Yeah. True. True. Right. The last couple, these are a couple of random
Yep.
odd questions, but I'm intrigued to see
All
your
good.
answers.
Okay.
First off, what are you currently obsessed with? It can be anything at all.
Uh, right now, probably going to the gym. I've been training a lot in the last 2 weeks, so it's kind of become a bit of an obsession where I just go every day and I don't think because the minute you start thinking, you'll find reasons not to go. And it's almost like this thing where I have almost like a bet with myself, like how many days in a row can I just keep going before I, fall off that wagon. But it's been going good so far. Playing music, obviously, I got shows coming up with a couple of different bands, so I got a bunch of songs I got to start learning and going over. Um, and musically, I'm trying to think what I'm listening to. I mean, I listen to everything. I love, some of the, I mean, I don't know if you want to call them a new band, but like I love Ghost. I think phenomenal band. Again, it fits into my wheelhouse of visually very
Yeah.
cool. We went as a family, my wife and my two daughters, to go see Ghost when they came for last year in September. My girls like are all gothed out and enjoying, the experience, and they knew all the songs, they know all the material, and I just think, Tobias Forge, I think great writer.
Mm,
Um, Sonically, the albums sound phenomenal, and I even say, to me, there's elements of Queen, there's elements of like hard rock, and it's very unique. And again, like a lot of bands that dare to go with these visual things, you get a lot of flack where people just,
mm,
shit on it because it's different,
yeah.
and but if you listen to the music, I mean, I love the tracks. I think they're a phenomenal band. And I'm looking forward. I'm gonna be going to see. I'm actually going to see Jason Bonham next month with the Zeppelin Experience.
Oh man.
So he comes through here with this phenomenal band, and it's really. I saw it probably about 10 years ago, but it was so warm and interactive. Like it's like he's got home movies of him playing with his dad, and they're jamming out to like a Zeppelin tune. And he walked out the beginning of the show. He just walked out on the middle of the stage and started talking to the crowd, saying, it's a bit of a celebration of my dad, and and this and that, and the band. And like I said, home movies playing while the band's going, and it was really cool.
Oh man.
So I'm going to see that, and I'm going to see actually Heart with Cheap Trick in the summer because
Oh
again,
nice.
phenomenal band, and my daughter's a huge fan, so she was like super excited. So yeah, those are the shows I'm looking forward to right now. So I guess I'm excited about, up here in Canada, we get cold weather and winters can be dark and long. This winter, actually, the gods smiled upon us. We didn't get much snow, not that cold, really rare. I mean, I guess I don't know if you chalk it up to global warming, but they pretty much say it was the El Nino that caused it. But we had a great winter, but at by this point, like we're just chomping at the bit for the warm weather and the summers.
Yeah.
We live
Yeah.
here in the city of extremes. Like the summers are unbelievable. It's like sunny, it's hot, humid. We have music festivals everywhere downtown and in the city, and it really comes alive. And then in the winter, it's like, darkness and snow and
Yeah.
cold, you know.
Right. It's not too bad though. You could almost put up with that if you know you're going to get a good summer.
Well, that's sort of the trade-off, right? It's like I said, it's a bit of a world of two extremes. You go from the crazy winters to like, okay, man, when summer gets here, and then summer gets here and everybody's outdoors and everybody's on their balconies and, having barbecues and having a pint. And it's just, the city comes to life and then kind of goes to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. I gotcha. And the final question, so what album is your go-to album?
Ooh, God, there's so many. I got a few. It depends on my mood. I mean, I think on my phone I have at least 30 albums that I'm always sort of some stay and some I move in. Rush Exit Stage Left, definitely one of them. I would say um, Kiss, probably Kiss Alive one is like that's the album that when I heard it, like just it's funny because I know the story of how they cheated on that album to basically make you feel the impact of what a Kiss concert was like back in '75. And when I heard it, it had that exact effect on me. Like I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and the crowd so loud, and these explosions that are actually 1812 cannons that they dubbed in afterwards.
Yeah.
What's his name? Eddie Kramer did. So that's definitely in there. I would even say Frampton Comes Alive, another fantastic album. I've seen Peter Frampton a couple of times. Phenomenal guitar player, great songwriter. Depends on my moods. I mean, Steely Dan's another band. I freaking anytime they come on, it's like a nice massage for the brain and ears. Like they're
Yeah.
just so smooth, you
Mm.
know. And the heavier stuff, I mean, I love, Rage Against the Machine, stuff like that, Soundgarden, obviously, Metallica, Megadeth. Um, it's really a mood thing, but I would definitely put Kiss and Rush and probably maybe even Maiden up in the in that bag, like something from any of those takes me back to being a kid and being in my bedroom and going through all the stuff and freaking out and just being so enthralled with what I was listening to. So
I like it. I like it.
yeah.
Listen, Steve, it's been an absolute blast now. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a million.
Yeah, man, me too. I mean, we could, if we were sitting here now, I'd be like, all right, let's continue and go to the bar, the pub, and get a pint, and
Yeah, I
continue
was
this.
thinking the same myself.
Yeah, it would be amazing. But anyway, hopefully one day we'll either get out there and meet in person or you'll be down here. If you ever are, definitely drop me a line. Happy to take
Definitely.
you out for a pint. And
Definitely.
when the new stuff comes out for Devil on the Run, I'll definitely email you now that we have each other's contacts and give you a preview of what we're doing before it goes out.
Welcome to the podcast, conscience that made us. Interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts, concerts that made us, concerts that